Hello and welcome. This is the first of a series that we'll do on hashtag the leader I want. It is part of Rappler's election coverage. In the hot seat today, former DILG Secretary Mar Roxas with the ruling Liberal Party. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Maria, Glenda, Bea, sa ating mga tagsubaybay. Ay magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
So the three of us will be tossing questions to Mar, and what we will do first is we'll do a question and a follow-up, and then after that you're going to take three questions, so you'll have an idea what we're each interested in. Three questions each, and we'll start with the person closest to Mar on a daily basis, Bea Cupid. So let me start.
Sure.
I'll start with unique time in history. These elections are extremely tight. You have perspective that no one else really has and will help determine history. How do you see Philippine politics today?
Well, I think that it's evolutionary. Certainly, I see an electorate that is much more educated, much worldlier, much broader than 2010 and than 2004 and every iteration before that. No? We have 10 million people in the diaspora. We've got 1 million people who are here earning their income, essentially being connected to the outside world. That's in the IT, BPO, call center industry. Yeah. There's another 1 million, roughly, people who are earning their money through IT by being editors, graphic artists, English teachers and tutors to the rest of the world. You know? So you can't help but be much worldlier, much more attuned to modernity and modernization and global patterns. So it's a very exciting time. And I think that 2016 is very, very unique because for the first time in many generations, it is actually a valid campaign platform to say, ituloy. You know? Kadalasan, in every election, patalsikin, baguhin, you know, reforma, etc. ang panawagan. No? But for 2016, because of the performance of President Pinoy and Daang Matuwid, it is a very, very valid, credible platform for us. And that's exactly what Lenny and I are projecting, which is itutuloy natin ang Daang Matuwid. No? And I think for those reasons, it's going to be quite unique.
And to follow up again to you, because if you become president, you will lead this country. What lessons have you learned about leadership?
I think that the lessons of leadership have always been there. It's credibility, it's transparency, and it's really inclusiveness, consensus building, consultative. There's an old Chinese proverb that I always remember and apply to the best that I can. If you want to go fast, bring few. You want to go far, bring many, right? And that speaks to gaining the trust and the confidence of the entire Filipino nation, and you can only really do that by being truthful and credible, by showing them that truly their interest is above all other interests, and that your actions are for their welfare. So we can move our country very far, as Pinoy has been able to do over the last 5 years, because he has shown those leadership qualities, and the people have responded. I think that it's notable at no time in our history that in year 5 of a presidency, the president enjoys 65% approval and trust ratings. I think that's very, very unique. That's notable and unheard of in contemporary history. But that did not happen by chance. That did not happen by luck. That happened because consistently Pinoy and Daang Matuwid were true to what we presented ourselves to be in 2010.
Fantastic. Bea Cupid, who shadows you on a daily basis, takes the stage, and then she'll be followed by our Rappler's managing editor, Glenda Gloria.
Sir, your last position in government as DILG, we're always at the forefront of disasters.
Not causing them, just responding to them.
Literally, we're there before typhoons would make landfall, preparedness, mitigation, response, that all fell under you when you were the DILG chief. What lessons did you learn from those experiences, particularly in 2013, na sunod-sunod, it was Bohol, and then Zamboanga, and then you have Yolanda?
I think the lesson there is presence counts. Many times it's really the physical help that you can bring.
Right.
But more often than not, it's the lakas loob, it's the confidence, it's the hope that your presence conveys to the victims that hindi kami nag-iisa, hindi kami nakalimutan, at kahit papano makakarating yung pinsala o makakarating yung problema namin sa mga matataas na opisyal at masasagip kami or maasikaso kami. Sec Volts and I were in Zamboanga from the very first day, and we lived there for 21 days. The whole city was under siege. Roughly 500 fully armed insurgents and had come in and tried to take over the city. Government forces were stretched thin all throughout the archipelago, and so they had to be reassembled. And for the first few days, it was really just a holding action, containment, before it became encirclement, and then finally it became coming in and eliminating the hostage takers and the insurgents. So it's really keeping the confidence alive of the rest of the populace, providing leadership at the ground level. The president himself was there for 9 days, also to provide leadership. And I think that this is the key. I think this is one of the key lessons that we've learned, and also that we have shown our people. Your presence is tumututuo ka eh. Tumututuo ka sa iyong pagiging lingkod bayan. And these are not presences na you come in with a few bags of goods, do the photo op, and then chop her out. We were there before the calamities and storms. We stayed through, and we committed ourselves until stabilization, until the normal processes could restart, until we let go and we went back to Manila. So for Sec Volts, for myself, for Sec Dinky, for the president, for all of us who are really at the front lines, it's not just physically being there, but also giving the hope that you're not being left behind, and that your government will be there to help you.
Pero sir, kambal din ata nun, being in the front lines, kambal din nun yung controversy. I mean, in every disaster that you attend to, you will always attract controversy. For example, in Yolanda, it's something that your detractors to this day are bringing up again on social media, offline. That meeting between you and Mayor Romualdez, where he claimed parang that you were asking for documentation pa when his city was in need. So, looking back, like, what was the thought process? Why did you find that necessary, for instance, to...
Bea, first of all, in this job, as in all jobs, including the job that I'm aspiring to, sala sa init, sala sa lamig. I mean, you're not there, ba't wala dito yan? Pag pumunta ka naman, ba't nandito yan? Right? So, at the end of the day, we just do what we think is right. Now, as regards Yolanda, this meeting was maybe a week later already. This was several days after Yolanda had hit. We had attended to beginning to bring in resources, massive resources, from the outside into the storm area, in particular Leyte and Tacloban. Everything that was pre-positioned, everything that was prepared before Yolanda was wiped out. Sec Volts and I put ourselves at risk. We were there beforehand precisely to embody the seriousness of the situation, to tell the locals this is a very, very strong typhoon, category 5. And in fact, notwithstanding that, we ourselves did not really imagine how strong this typhoon could be. I mean, this was the strongest typhoon that ever hit land in recorded human history. So, talagang napakatindi nitong si Yolanda. And the very first hours, when we were walking, trying to get to the airport, because there was no communication, and our thinking was, airport, tower, may connection sa Manila yon. We have to tell Manila how bad things are here. We have to tell them na talagang na-wipe out ito, no? From those very first hours, well, 24 hours later, the airport, we were able to clear. The first C-130 landed, and full force ang ayuda, ang tulong na dinala, no, sa typhoon area. That particular meeting was really taken out of context and politicized, no? In fact, it was my effort to depoliticize the situation. You know, I was appealing to the mayor. Mayor, ano ba talaga ang kakayanin ninyo? Kung wala naman, sabihin po ninyo. Pero kung meron, ano pa ang kakayanin ninyo? At ano ang maidadala ng national government? Kasi hindi naman lang po Tacloban ang nasalanta o napinsala. There were 171 local government units. Millions of people across Visayas, from Eastern Samar to Western Samar to the entirety of Leyte, Northern Cebu, Northern Negros, the Panay Island, all the way to Palawan, were all hit along the Yolanda Highway. No? So we were trying to, you know, rationalize resources, attention, what needs to be done first. So it was really my effort to tell the mayor, hindi ko gustong mapolitika ito. In fact, you must remember that this is a political situation because of who you are and who the president is. So it wasn't in the manner of a threat or in a manner na i-withhold, but really, intindihin niyo, Mayor, gusto naming linawin ito. Hindi dinadala ang tulong, no? Tuloy-tuloy ang pagdating ng tulong, but moving forward, ano ba, may kakayanin pa ba o wala, no? Because kung wala naman, din dadalhin namin at ipaprioritize. Pero kung meron namang kakayahan dito, then we can help other communities also. It was in that context that conversation was held. And unfortunately, napolitika ito. But for example, no, just as a matter of statistic, out of the 2 billion pesos that passed through that passed through DILG, to help local government units, cities and municipalities with reconstruction, 400 million went to Tacloban. No? One-fifth of all funds of 171 LGUs went to Tacloban. So hindi na pinagkait ito sa kanila, hindi na pinagdamot ito sa kanila. Dumating ito sa kanila, no? In cash, no? Yan ang dumaan sa DILG. That much I can speak of. I know that Dinky will have her own, Secretary Dinky will have her own statistics as to how many food packs and how many sacks of rice and so on and so forth. So, palagay ko hindi fair ng parating kritisismo ay hindi dumating ang tulong or pinulitika ito, no? But that's what we just say, no? Na sala sa init, sala sa lamig. So, ganyan talaga yan.
Ganda, Gloria.
Well, yeah, thanks for that brief course on crisis management. But going back in relation to that, Secretary, they also say that leaders sometimes are faced with very limited options and limited time to act on certain things. And I am personally curious, do you have any one major decision which you based primarily on your gut feel or the instincts? My instincts told me I'm gonna do this and therefore I will make that decision.
I will have to give that a good think. But basically, my instinct is always what's straight up, what's common sense, what's effective. That's basically my instinct whenever I'm confronted with a decision. No? Zamboanga. I was in Malolos, Bulacan. I received a sketchy report on my cell phone that a number of these Muslim separatists were caught with guns and with uniforms, with patches inside Zamboanga City. two and two together, there was a report of a firefight out in Zamboanga Bay with the Navy, you know, and a what they call a Junkong, which is one of these fast craft, right? Instinct, there's something brewing here. This was all within the context that Miswari was making his caravans around Mindanao. Instinct, I called up Sec Bolts. Sec Bolts, we don't know 2 plus 2 equals 5 ba ito or ano ba ito? Puntahan natin. Let's go to the front line. And true enough, when we got there, yun, putukan na. Barilan na, bombahan, mortaran. So, it's really instinctual that to be there, that got us there. No? Yolanda, just to go back to Yolanda, it was instinct. We were at Crame, at Aguinaldo, and the RRMC, ang lakas nito, malakas ito. So, you know, all of the modeling on screens. My instinct was that, you know, the LGUs are not taking this seriously, or even if they were, the way the forecasters were speaking this was really a 1 in 100 year event. So, kailan ba darating ang bagyo? Supposed to be alas 8 the next morning. This was like at 1 in the afternoon. Sekbots, puntahan natin. Siguraduhin natin. So we went, and doon na kami for another 2 weeks. So it's really, the instinct is to get something done, to be there. Just to continue with this thread, no? Ruby, we were in Borongan, Samar, right? The landfall was in a town north of Borongan. Instinct, puntahan natin, because there was no communication. Nobody could tell the police. Nobody could tell what was happening there. Pumunta kami ron. Hindi kami makalusot dahil nahulog yung mga telephone posts, electric posts, yung mga puno, no? Nakikita ko ng motorsiklo, sinakyan ko motorsiklo, nahulog ako. Yun ang lumabas sa media, pero hindi lumabas na yung instinct ko ay puntahan itong bayan na ito na doon nag-landfall, no? Si Ruby, at kinailangan ng presensya at malaman ng Manila kung ano talaga ang kalagayan doon. So, my instinct is to take action. My instinct is to go and find out what can be done and to actually go do it.
So what did your instinct tell you when you learned about Mama Sapano?
Well, that's why we went the next day to find out what happened.
Okay.
No? We learned about it Sunday in the afternoon. And so the very next morning, we flew to Cotabato City to find out. And
the instinct was not to ask the president.
We were together the whole day.
Okay.
No? And we figured that we were together in Zamboanga looking out after the bombing. No?
Yeah.
The PNP had not told me that there was an operation going on that day. Wala namang so there was wala sa kaisipan ko na something was happening on that day, no? That morning I received a text from the intelligence officer of the PNP that morning, Sunday morning at about 7 o'clock, I think, that Marwan was killed in an operation and that extraction was going on. I passed this off to the president. I said, you know, you may not know this, but I got this, and I'm trying to find out more. I asked the intelligence officer of the PNP, Director Kalima, to find out more and to get back to me. No other officer of the PNP was telling me that there was something going on. So I thought it was an ordinary course of business encounter, and that was the end of that. So meantime, the rest of the day we had focused on the bombing in Zamboanga City. Until during the course of the day, first sketchy reports and finally confirmatory reports from the tripartite observers that in fact there was an encounter, there was a high number of casualties, which turned out later on to be 44, and that this was all part of the plan to get Marwan and Usman. After that, the next day, Sec Volts and I, flew to Cotabato to find out what was happening, what went on, and then the rest of it is as we all discovered in the Senate hearings. No?
I know we'll go back to that, but let me pull it out and follow the first train Glenda started, which is really, in the end, leadership of the Philippines will rely on the man. And you now have a track record that you look at. Your critics point to moments of indecision in key times of historical impact, like in the time of President Gloria Arroyo, when the Hayat 10 came out. You sat on the fence in key moments. Your critics in DOTC or DILG say that it takes you time to make a decision. What do you say to these things?
I think that, by definition, they're from critics. So what do you expect? No, during the time of President Gloria, I served in her cabinet. The Hayat 10 had made a move. I kept quiet, having just been elected to the Senate. At that point, the issues that they were raising were issues within the cabinet that I was not privy to. And so I remember that my statement at the time is that all of these allegations should be investigated and that the truth should come out. Subsequently, I made my break with President Gloria. At the DOTC, I think it's important to note that the DOTC is involved in programs and projects that span 4 or 5 years. Railways, roadways, airports. You don't buy this off the shelf. No? But if you're looking for decision making, I decided quite clearly, for example, passenger bill of rights. I didn't think it was right for airlines to just bump off passengers or cancel flights. So even if it was harmful to people who were operating these businesses whom I knew, I said you cannot do this. In other countries, passengers get compensated if their flights are changed, and that's what we put in place. When I was DOTC, I decided quite firmly and clearly that I didn't want to have a repeat of the mega 1,000 death disasters with sea accidents or sea disasters or sea tragedies. So I said, even if it will affect your businesses, signal number 1, 300 tons, 33 tons and below cannot go out anymore. And signal number 2, no matter what size of your vessel, you cannot go out anymore. I mean, so what if you lose 1 day's revenue? We're not going to put our people at risk. Those are decisions that I've made. We said no to the continuation of the anomalous Stratcom contract, and we started the bid for that. I decided, after having studied it well, that we were going to start the new Bohol Airport in Panglao, the new Puerto Princesa expansion and airport facilities, and the new Bicol Airport in Daraga. Although there was an existing airport in Legazpi, So maybe these critics don't understand that when you think of an airport project, you don't. It's not like, oh, let's go out and buy an iPhone and let's go to the iStore and buy an iPhone. I mean, an airport is by definition, when you decide that you're going to start an airport, chances are you're not going to be around until that, even to bid it out, or even to award the bid, or even to have it seen constructed, let alone completed. Roadway, the same thing. When Manny Pangilinan and Ramon Ang were fighting over the NLEX-SLEX connector, I decided, and I sat both of them down separately and said, we need to have these connectors built. And so agreed with them that both of their projects would go through, rather than have them mired in court and not have anything happen. So Ramon Ang's San Miguel's project is going through; it's being built from South SLEX through Quirino, through Plaza Dilao, Araneta Avenue, etc., all the way to NLEX, and likewise Manny Pangilinan. The fact that they're not yet finished is because it really takes years to build these elevated roadways. But those decisions were made under my watch. So
Let me say
Yeah.
the spirit for this
Right.
this question, and this I'll explain it a little bit more. It's really that oftentimes a leader's greatest strength is also his or her greatest weakness. And in your case, your corporate background, your attention to detail, these are all strengths, right? And yet at the same time, at key moments, by looking at too many details, it may actually not. It may prevent you from making a critical decision. I suppose, like in the case of Yolanda, in crisis management, reports came out that you asked for the numbers of the people who were there instead of counting the people, instead of actually bringing help immediately. So things like this, I guess the question is for you.
I think first of all, Maria, I think I will dispute the premise of your question.
Okay.
At no time did I say, well, how many people have been affected. Clearly, there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions,
Yes.
right? The questions that
But the data gathering in that moment, because a leader would have to make decisions with imperfect information.
Again, I dispute that there was data gathering that was being done in those, particularly in those early hours and days. No? The data gathering that was being done was how many tons of rice could be brought in by C-130 versus by ship, versus by road, by land trip. How many cars or vehicles are stuck in Allen and Matnog because they cannot come through to Samar? I mean, those were the kinds of decisions that had to be made. There was looting that was going on. How many policemen can we bring in from Region 4A, from Masbate, from Cebu and other places to augment the policemen in Leyte and in Tacloban who were all victims? Out of nearly 200 policemen in Tacloban, 20 showed up.
Correct.
So there was no time to say who was absent, who was not. It was clearly, let's bring in from the outside, because no matter what the number is, they're all victims and they're all attending to their families, or they themselves may have died.
Right.
Nobody really knew. There was no communication. There was no cell phone. There was nothing. No power, no water, no light. There was really nothing. So it was all, let's bring in as much as we can, as fast as we can.
But you're saying you haven't had these moments of indecision.
I don't think so. I would really dispute. I mean, what example? For example, Yolanda, you had to be there from the first hour and see what decision. We went immediate, even while the winds were still raging. Segvolts and I walked to City Hall. That was a decision. Let's go and establish a command center. When we got to City Hall, there was nobody there. There were a few victims. There was a few personnel. The so-called disaster risk reduction, city disaster risk reduction, was not functioning in City Hall at that time. There was really nobody. We went to the police station, which was next door. We established the command post there. We could not talk to anybody. There was no radio. There was no cell phone, nothing. What did we do? We scavenged for bicycles and sent out 2 or 3 policemen that were present, go to this place and go to that place and try and establish what's happening. By mid-afternoon, everything was really just at a standstill, not getting any reports. We said, there may be a radio in the airport. Let's walk to the airport. So these are all decisions that we made at the heat of that morning, and that was the same attitude that we had all through the first several weeks until things stabilized.
My third is, are there things about yourself as a leader you would change now?
I don't claim to be perfect. I'm sure that there are qualities that I can what's the word? Modify or reduce, and there may be other qualities that need to be exposed more. I've been called impatient, but I think I'm just passionate. The jobs that I've had involve people, lives, futures, and so I'm very passionate that this be paid attention to, or whatever these problems are paid attention to, and not just kicked down the road to have another person attend to them. Sometimes my passion is misinterpreted to be sort of suplado, but I mean no ill will. I'm just passionate and I'm impatient for solutions, and that's what drives me to push for exactly what's happening.
Thank you.
I think I'll just start reading social media questions, sir.
Sure.
Talk about impatience. A lot of people are impatient over the FOI. I know in several media forums, interviews, people keep bringing that up. They're saying na parang malabo na parang you're pushing for anti-corruption, and yet what happened to the FOI now? Parang that's what people are asking.
Well, I think, Bea, let's put first things first. No, we are for the FOI. The president is for the FOI. He has said it before the end of his term that he will pass it into law. I am committed to the FOI, and if for whatever reason it's not passed now, it's something that I will push. Should I become president? No, I am for the FOI. I am for transparency. It's a basic plank of Daang Matuwid. No? There are some provisions that are problematic in the House of Representatives, but I assume that this will all get sorted out. But having said that, I think that it's also fair to the administration, to Daang Matuwid, to say, while we're waiting for FOI to be passed into law, Daang Matuwid has undertaken many steps. Field JEPs, having the budget online, removing lump sums and itemizing the entire general appropriations bill, and so on and so forth. No, I mean, we have taken many steps that embody the transparency value that is underpinning the FOI bill. No? So in fact, was it the World Bank or some other international institution has adjudged us as one of the most transparent and with sort of full access to information governments relative to all the other governments that they survey. Yes, FOI is important, but just because it does not pass into law does not mean that we have not been transparent or we have not taken substantive steps for and towards transparency.
Will you pass it into law under Roxas presidency?
I am committed to the FOI.
Oh, so me. Okay. There's another question from social media, actually. How different are you from Pinoy? And what do you think are the missed opportunities during Pinoy's term, and what will you do to... Or is it too early to ask?
I think that, it's easy to go 20/20 hindsight, no? But let me say this. I think that Pinoy addressed the problems of 2010, right? But the problems of 2016 are going to be different, right? Pinoy had to reinstitute all of the transparency and good governance principles in the institutions themselves that were destroyed by the previous administration. Contracts had to be cut, or agreements had to be rescinded. The Laguna Lake, what Pinoy calls just playing with mud, 14 billion pesos moving mud from one part of Laguna Lake to another. In my department at the DOTC, there was the GMA steel ports that they had bought the steel, but had not yet even decided on what ports or what the locations were for where these ports would be. No? And so on and so forth, right? So there was a lot of house cleaning to do. These were generations worth of problems, and so we had, there was a lot of time and attention necessary to correct all of these things, right? The problem for 2016 would be building on these gains, right? Making sure that making sure that whatever inclusive growth may have been there is fortified and magnified and accelerated, no? So we're looking at the bibingka approach na may init sa taas at may init sa baba, no? So it's not just if you macro sa taas na if you build it, the jobs and incomes will come, but we're doing it with affirmative action direct at the family level, so that in fact the people and the families can realize their hopes for themselves, no? Classrooms are being built, education is being fortified. This is very, very critical, including science and technology. It's very critical for the future because advances in science do not stop. And so what were once secure jobs may, because of science and technology, become vulnerable to change or vulnerable to migration to other countries. I'll give you an example, no? Here's a strategic threat for the IT BPO call center industry. Artificial intelligence. There are many, many tasks that because of artificial intelligence can be automated and will no longer require a human to sit behind that console with a headset talking, right? The simplest case would be directory assistance. It's now a computer-generated voice that actually answers as opposed to a human being. So we need to keep investing in education so we start moving up the value chain. We bit the bullet on K to 12, aligning our education system with the rest of the world. That way, our nurses, our mariners, our physical therapists, our doctors are not disadvantaged because when they look at the curriculum vitae, the Indonesian gets 12 years of preparatory education, the Filipino only 10 years. Even if both are board passers, there is starting to be a discrimination against us because precisely they have more years of education. So by doing K to 12, we are able to equalize that, no? And continue to provide opportunity for our people and for our workers. And so these are the kinds of things that that has been done under the last 5 years of President Pinoy into his 6th year, and which we want to continue under Daang Matuwid, no? Nobody's saying it's perfect. Walang nagsasabi na narating na natin ang paradiso, no? But palagay ko naman na malayo nang narating natin at mas malayo pang mararating natin kung itutuloy natin ito. Imbes na bumalik na naman tayo sa square one, mag-reset, no? At baka iba na naman ang tatahaking nating landas.
Well, let's go to very specific events now, Secretary. There are reports actually that the Iglesia ni Cristo is again planning a mass mobilization this weekend. And well, with that context in mind, I'm curious, will you still ask for the Iglesia support in the 2016 race?
I'm not aware of this. I'm no longer in DILG and I have not heard that. For them to have mass action is not necessarily, per se bad. Any citizen, any group, there are mass actions that are happening all across our country at any given time. No?
Will you ask for their support?
Why not? I want to lead this country, and I'd like to start the consensus building effort even before winning the position.
Of course, we gathered information, for example, that the Iglesia is very deeply entrenched in the Quezon City Police District. At the time that you were DILG chief, did you ever receive similar information about how well connected the Iglesia is to a point that they can actually cut corners as far as police issues are concerned?
Wala naman. There were always these rumors, but for example, I chose the former QCPD head, General Albano, because they were not delivering on lambat sibat performance.
Yeah.
I relieved and replaced him with his deputy, General Pagdilaw, who continued to deliver, or not continued, who began delivering reduced crime rates in Quezon City.
So it's not true that he's an Iglesia lobby?
Nobody came to me to say, ilagay mo si Pagdilaw as QCPD. and I just thought that he had he was the one who was working on it as deputy to General Albano, and so I placed him there, and with no guarantees if he wasn't delivering the number. Let me just talk about Lambat-Sibat. I remember I presented that to you here,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
From 918 incidents per week, by the time I presented to you here, we were at 500. Okay, this was about a year ago. Today, we are at 280 incidents a week, right? So there's nearly 700 Filipinos every week na nailayo natin sa kapahamakan, right? And that's across the board. Manila, Quezon City, Mandaluyong, etc. No? SPD, WPD, EPD, lahat. No? Is there still crime? Yes. I mean, just by that very statistic, there's still 280, 300 incidents per week. But this is certainly a third of what it was when we started this in June of 2014, right? So these are the advances. These are the metrics that I used in promoting and moving people around. If, for example, you could not ensure that the statistics that were being reported were in fact blotter-based, then we relieved you, whether you were chief of police level or regional director, not regional, QCPD, district director level, right? And those are the metrics that I had used, and I think that the police leadership responded to that, and that's why even until now they have the regular Lambat-Sibat meetings, and until now it's very, very focused on reducing crime and on catching the most wanted people in
Can you
Metropolis.
implement the same, well, in a manner of speaking, in terms of addressing this monster in Metro Manila, traffic? What specific solutions do you have in mind, and what solutions have changed, have failed? What do you think should be done immediately? For example, discouraging car owners from purchasing. Do you have very specific?
Look, there have been many studies about traffic in Metro Manila, no? But here's it's really first to decongest, right? And then to fix and I'll explain each one, right? To decongest, to fix the franchise system, and then some discipline as well, right? What does decongest mean? Well, the NLEX, SLEX connectors that I talked about will decongest EDSA, for example, will decongest Quirino, will decongest Ross Boulevard, will decongest our streets from all of the tractor trailers that come out of the ports, because they will be now using these elevated roadways. So that's going to be some help, right? But that's not going to be long term, because every year there are 300,000 vehicles that are added to the population of vehicles in our country. Most of that, 80% of it, are in Metro Manila or in the nearby provinces, right? By the way, when I was DTI, 60,000 vehicles a year was like a big year, right? Now we're hitting 300,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the thing. The construction of these roadways will decongest. Second, I will change the franchise system of the buses. There is no modern metropolis in the world that has buses owned by multiple private entities. What happens? The competition for passengers, in fact, serve to create traffic jams, because the bus at the rear goes and takes up a lane to overtake the bus that's loading now so that he can get to the passengers immediately at the next stop. And the one behind likewise takes another lane to do the same 2 stops further down. No? Why is that? They have different balance sheets. They're different entities. No? So I would collapse all of these franchises and bid it out. I would bid it out. I would say we need on EDSA, I don't know, whatever, 200 buses, 300 buses. The specs are they must be LNG, so there's no spewing of diesel. Second, they must be no more than 5 years old at any given time. On its 5th year, you have to retire it, move it to the province, or send it to Vietnam, or whatever it is. Number 3, your drivers must be paid a fixed wage so that they're not competing for the passengers, right? I'm sure there are other elements to that bid, But you bid that out, and in effect, you'll have a single lane of buses like in all other cities, whether it's in Japan or in Singapore or any other place. You'll have buses just disciplined, and you'll have the lanes left for the other vehicles. No, and then the last element would be discipline. I note that there's been I don't know. Let me ask you: has there been some palpable difference in traffic patterns? Let's just say on EDSA. Since the HPG took over.
People are more scared of the HPG, I think, more than the...
So there's more discipline. I think that, it used to take me an hour and a half to get from the airport to my house. It takes me 40 minutes now. So I don't know whether that's just unique in one particular day, but I think that there's been more free-flowing of traffic over the last several weeks. Maybe the drivers are more afraid of HPG. Well, that's good. I mean, maybe they're more disciplined. Maybe they follow the rules more. They stay in lane more. No? What's important here is that we realize traffic is always going to be a problem. Right? I mean, anytime that you have growth and development, anytime that your interest rates are at 5-8%, and for next to nothing, you can actually go out and buy a car for 300,000 pesos. This is an aspiration of most people that they want to have a car or a vehicle. No? So in any growing metropolis, traffic's going to be a problem. So it's government's job to create more infrastructure, elevated as it may be, to improve mass transit, to impose discipline, and to certainly rearrange the rules and regulations, such as in franchises, so that you have a disciplined bus service, as opposed to each bus rushing to the next bus stop to compete for passengers. No? Specific enough for you, Gloria?
I want to take you out globally now. I mean, it's a far more complicated world. What do you consider the biggest threat in the geopolitical, economic landscape?
There will be increasing competition as between the U.S. and China. I think that's a given.
Correct.
It will be felt in the West Philippine Sea.
Yes.
But it will also be felt in other fora, WTO, global warming conferences, regulations as to limit the spewing forth of pollutants into the air, and so on and so forth. So that's one dynamic that will continue to be present. Second would be fight for resources.
Yes.
When I was in high school, it's a long time ago, I remember our socio-economic class, and there was like 4 billion people on Earth. It's now 7 billion, well on its way to 8 billion, doubling. And the Earth has not grown. I mean, it's the same amount of hectareage, the same seas and oceans, and the same resources. No? So you have twice the number of people that have to feed off the same. So resources, minerals, food, water, clean water is going to be a major issue, and a fight for those resources are going to, competition for those resources hopefully doesn't evolve into a fight. Competition will become quite intense. No? I think that the impact of global warming is going to have substantial effect on us. Unfortunately, we are not the cause of that problem. Right? We contribute very, very little to that problem. Unfortunately, the impact of that problem is felt very much by us because of changing weather patterns. You know, we have 25 storms every year, and you can see that by the intensity of it, by the strength even of the usual habagat. I mean, the torrential rains that come from habagat is really quite severe. And then all of a sudden, switch to El Nino, drought. So we're going to be feeling the impact of climate change, even if we are a very small contributor to the problem. These are some of the sort of global patterns, no? increased fundamentalism in the Muslim world. That's something that we have to be very, very careful about, and that's why it's very important that the peace in Mindanao is secured as early as possible, so that we don't enter that sphere where the ISIS and the more fundamentalists and the more extremists take root here in our country. So these are some of the patterns that I see in the global world.
Would you do anything differently in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea?
I think there's, our options are quite limited by our being militarily smaller or weaker than China, right? I mean, we cannot hit them over the head with a club.
Yeah.
And so really, it's really to go to the United Nations, to go through UNCLOS, to make our claim and ask for arbitration, which is what we did. We have to be very active in securing multinational support for our efforts, and I'm glad that the other countries are also echoing the same sentiment about the aggressiveness of China in the West Philippine Sea. And I'm also quite glad that the U.S. is now making some definite moves to have its presence, particularly in the freedom of navigation aspect, felt in the area.
3 top issues you'll address in your first 100 days if you win.
I think that's all the issues are how can you say that an issue of feeding our people is more important than corruption or is more important than education? I think that if filling the cabinet with competent, honest people, making sure that we are all aligned, that it's the people's interest, and that the metric, I'm defining the metric as the Filipino family, right? Not all this GDP, and those are all very important. And don't get me wrong, I'm not poo-pooing them. Those are all very important. But at the end of the day, what does it mean for this Filipino family? Do they have a steady job? Can they borrow more? Is their healthcare more affordable? Do their kids have an opportunity to finish their education? Is their livelihood hanap buhay for the family? Is there security in their home? No? Are they free from fear of a calamitous event? I think that by focusing it on the family, we will make government much more relevant to the average person. So those are the things that I would be focusing on. All the rest of it are just programs to make that happen. Are programs and projects to make that happen. What are some of these programs and projects? I think that we can have a revival. We ought to have, and we need to have a revival in the agriculture sector. 1/3 of our people are dependent on agriculture, but it only produces about 12% of our GDP. That means that the slice of the pizza pie for agriculture is very, very thin, and yet there's so many people that are dependent on it. Translation, they are poor. Mahirap ang buhay. No? So we need to have a resurgence in agriculture. We need to find a way of having a consolidation so that there are economies of scale, so that they're not buying fertilizer by the scoop, but that they're buying fertilizer and pesticides and seeds, certified seeds, at bulk prices rather than tingi prices. That they have access to market, that they have access to credit. All of these things, market access, credit access, bulk buying or wholesale price for factor inputs, cannot happen if you are a 1-hectare family farm. They can continue to own the land, but there must be a way, either through joint venture, leasing, cooperatives, of creating scale, so that we're looking at 100 hectares, 200 hectares, so that there's mechanization, there's buying of factor inputs, maramihan imbes na tingi, no? Mas mura kung maramihan, no? And so on and so forth. And I think that there can be a real resurgence and sort of a whole dynamism in agriculture by finding that 20% of the crop 20% of whether it's palay or corn is lost after harvest because of dull blades in the thresher, because of it's drying on the street rather than through mechanized drying, because it's sako-sako rather than through the massive sort of bulk handling. No? Every time that sako-sako is passed from one shoulder to the other, there's a few pieces of corn or palay that fall by the wayside, and all of these things serve to reduce the income of the farmer. No? And here's another example. No? Repolyo in Baguio, without storm, regular times is maybe 10-12 pesos a kilo. How come it becomes 35 pesos a kilo 3 hours later when it gets to farmer's market? That's just the inefficiency of the logistics supply chain.
Yes.
The farmers don't benefit, the consumers don't benefit. It's the traders, the 4 or 5 hands na dinadaanan nitong produktong ito in between that benefit from this. No? So these are the ways that farmers can get more income and also benefit consumers. So these are things, all of these are equally important. I mean, I don't want to say the top 3 things because all of these are equally important. The thing is to choose cabinet members and to have a very, very clear sort of guidance that this is how we're going to measure success, how it affects the Filipino family. No? And that each family is given an opportunity, yung pagkakataon sa bawat pamilya, that whatever their dreams are attainable.
Secretary, just a related question actually from the crowd. No? Sapat na ba ang nagawa ng food security czar at itutuloy nyo ba ang existence ng position na ito kahit na marami nagsasabi na ito ay redundant?
Siguro yung solusyon na food security czar in addition to the Department of Agriculture Secretary ay kinailangan nung kapanahunan yon, no? Nagkaroon tayo ng kokolisap infestation, maraming mga hamon no? So other than the regular programs, meron sigurong kinailangan na dagdag na mata, dagdag na attention, dagdag na manager para matingnan ito, no? Pag na-stabilize naman siguro ang sitwasyon, ay babalik tayo sa regular na iisa ang Department of Agriculture. Without prejudice na at any given time, halimbawa, let's say lumala yung drought dito sa atin, yung El Nino. Why not have somebody that pulls in different disciplines, make sure that there's coordination, that the departments are not operating in silos. If that's necessary, then we should always be open to it. But it should not be permanent in that sense, because precisely you also don't want duplication and you don't want agawan ng eksena.
Yeah.
So speaking about agriculture, hunger, poverty, transpo, that's only some of the issues that you and your cabinet, should you win, will have to solve. Given that your campaign is hinged on the promise of continuity, continuing Daang Matuwid, does that mean people can expect you to appoint the same people to the cabinet, retain the cabinet?
Well, almost to a man or to a person, the cabinet members have all said na, they'd like to go back to the private sector. Many of them have been in government for 5 years, if not longer, no? And so medyo one of them said, bugbog na yung savings account ko, no? So nag-away na kami ng misis ko, ganun. So I think that it's just safe to assume that you're going to have a fresh new set of faces. Many if not all have expressed a desire to go back to private sector. They would have been with Pinoy in the public sector for the last 6 years, if not longer.
Sir, I know you mentioned in interaction, I think, TV5, you said it was presumptuous to name names at this point for the cabinet. But don't you think that that's something that you should already be thinking about, even as we start campaigning for 2016?
I've never had difficulty recruiting good people. I was slated for one job. Secretary Ping De Jesus resigns. Pinoy says, kailangan ka doon. Different set of disciplines, different set of needs.
Problems.
I won't mention names, but Stanford MBA, Ateneo Law School, had his own business, na-recruit natin. Top litigator from one of the top white shoe law firms in our country to make sure that the contracts are in good place, na-recruit natin. No? I think it's easy to recruit good people with integrity and credibility kung nakikita nila na matino ka rin. Hindi mo sila dadalhin sa alanganin. Hindi mo sila pipilitin na magsinungaling or mag-cover up. Kung tatansyahin ka rin nila, di ba? Titimbangin ka rin nila. Eto ba, malalagay ako sa alanganin? Mapapahiya ba ako rito? Yung mga anak ko na nag-aaral, kakantsawan ba ng mga kaklase nila na magnanakaw, ganito, ganon? So, titingnan ka rin nila at kung mataas naman ang kredibilidad mo, ay papasok din naman sila, no? So, I've never had difficulty recruiting good people, credible people, competent people, people with experience, kasi hindi mo namang gusto yung wala siyang karanasan sa pagmamanage, wala siyang, management, simply, I'll give you an example, Glenda, just to go back to our earlier question. Dumaan dito si Lando. Right? So, maraming tumatawag, tulong, ganun. So, marami naman mga nagvo-volunteers, paano kami tutulong? O sige, gumawa tayo ng food pack relief parang project, no? Tulong bayan. O sige, okay. Just the sequencing and knowing what should come first is very important. Dumating ang bigas, dumating ang delata, walang plastic. So, hindi ka makakilos. Kasi saan mo itatransfer, saan mo ililipat, no? At ipapackage, things like that. So, I'm just showing you that management is not something that should just be diminished in importance. Even knowing the sequencing of what steps to take is quite important, no? Because kung hindi, urong sulong, hurry up, wait, hurry up. So I think that it's quite important that we're able to attract credible people, people with integrity, people with experience, who have handled massive scale projects, because that's exactly what's needed in
And you wouldn't
in
mind appointing friends?
No, I mean, I don't think that it's an automatic disqualification. I think what would be an automatic disqualification would be a vested interest. If they're engaged in that business or if they're engaged in that activity, well, that's an automatic disqualification.
Have you decided against a friend or a relative, Secretary?
I believe so. I mean,
But you don't remember now.
No, I choose not to. Here's something specific, okay? You might wonder that though I am credited with being the father of the call center IT industry, how come Cubao, my family's real estate development, is only now, over the last 2 or 3 years, getting into call centers and IT? What happened, Glenda, was when I was DTI secretary and was starting this entire promotion, I did not allow my family to bid for PEZA accreditation. So, I mean, so that's a clear, you asked, I'm not making that yabang, no? But when I resigned from ERA, they asked me I resigned November 1. They asked me in December, pwede na ba kami mag-apply? Because at that time, sila Andrew Tan of Mega World were already dito sa Libis, di ba? I mean, so sabi ko, well, wala na ako sa gobyerno. Palagay ko, pwede na. Na-recruit tayo ni GMA in January, withdraw all your applications. Hindi ko gusto na sasabihin ng tao, pinromote ko itong call center, IT, BPO industry dahil pampuno ng office space sa Cubao. Diba? So, ngayon na lang, I mean, over the last 2-3 years, nung wala na ako sa DTI, nung wala na akong kinalaman sa industriya, na sila ay pumasok sa industriya.
Okay, good. Talking about relative or friends, you are a friend of the president, and certainly,
I hope you accepted that.
Yes, I'm sure you have disagreed with him.
Yeah.
Can you name one?
I think that as among friends, sa amin na lang yun, di ba? I think that we don't...
But as among public officials,
Well,
and you're running for president now, and we'd like to
Well,
know...
our disagreements may have been in emphasis, may have been in timing, but not on principle. We have had no disagreements on principle. There is
Did
no
you disagree on Mama Sapa?
There is no. It was difficult to disagree because
You did not know.
Purissima did not. Di ba? The president assumed regularity. Para sa Pangulo, iniutos niya, sabihan mo ito, i-inform mo sila. Tama naman lang na i-assume niya na yung utos niya ay susundin nung 4-star na general yun. Di ba? Hindi naman na walang nung itinago sa amin, di ba? I think that's well established naman in all the hearings. So there's no disagreement there.
Did you get mad?
Is Marwan, hold on, is Marwan a valid target? Yes. I mean, how many people
But
died?
perhaps
and
not at that time. That was a critical moment for the Bangsamoro law, wasn't it?
I think that the law enforcement aspect just has its own dynamic.
But sorry, so were you angry that you were left out of the loop?
I mean, the truth is, no, it crossed my mind that what happened, how come I did not, there was no clear sort of being made part of the loop. But I thought that it would be purely egotistical on my part. It would just be, na-hurt ako. Political act. I mean, the country is in crisis. Pinoy, his leadership, we have to maintain security. The PNP itself needed a stabilizing element. I mean, I told the president that if he had no more confidence, he had my resignation and would not, hindi ako magiging, I mean, I said it as a friend, no, na hindi ako magiging problema o sagabal kung gusto niya magkaroon ng pagbabago. But in the meantime, I was going to focus on what was important, which was to attend to the families, to attend to the PNP, to make sure that the security situation remained stabilized.
Sorry,
So
but
you did offer to quit.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him in
And the
Pangarap.
president.
I said, no, it is not. It has nothing to do with confidence. He said that, I assumed that alam mo ito lahat. Sabi ko, hindi naman sinabi sa akin.
Okay.
yours?
I want to ask this regarding Corina, because of course she's an influential personality. What role does she play in your campaign, and what would be a First Lady Corina Sanchez?
Well, first of all, she won't be in government. It's a big sacrifice for her. I've asked her to make that sacrifice. She's had to put her career on hold. I mean, Maria was present and was, the last time that I ran for public office, she's had to stop her career, when Maria was still with ABS-CBN, and likewise again now. And I would expect that, knock on wood, that we win, it becomes permanent. Her suspension, or not suspend, her stopping her career as a journalist would be longer term.
And during the campaign, does she? What role does
Sometimes
she play?
sometimes she represents me if I'm unable to make it, but clearly it's for functions where policy and is not discussed.
Okay.
I'll ask a last question about these elections. Now, I mean, you said everyone is different. President Aquino ran for the 2010 elections. This one you have, Comelec says, an estimated 39 million youth voters. How will you run your campaign differently for these elections? What's different now? What's this electorate like? What are they looking for?
Naman. Why will I tell you our tactics and strategy?
But I guess, how do you see the Filipino voter now? What's changed?
Well, much more educated, much more worldly, much more attuned to not just parochial matters, but really broader matters that affect communities and societies. But at the end of the day, they're also very concerned about what happens to their family. I mean, I think that's the very, very basic. And that's why really we focus Daang Matuwid sa pamilyang Pilipino. It's really, that's the metric. And that way, there is no, if you build it, they will come. Or if you build it, it will trickle down. No? We focus, so there's going to be affirmative action. President Pinoy has started that in with his Pantawid Pamilya, with his PhilHealth, with BUB, bottom-up budgeting, so that each community is assured of a minimum level of development. We're going to expand on that. And I think that again, no, nawala na bang kahirapan sa atin? Hindi. Marami pa ring mahirap, no? Pero palagay ko, kung dati-rate nandito yung tubig, medyo nandito, no? I mean, malayo pa, marami pa ang dapat na mangyari, no? Pero meron namang kaginhawahan na naihatid dito, no? Halimbawa, just to go back to the sin taxes, no? The president took a stand there against very, very powerful lobbies, the tobacco lobby, the beer lobby, the alcohol lobby. President took a very courageous stand there and pushed it. But what's the translation of that? There's 75 billion pesos that now remains in people's pockets because it is now PhilHealth that pays for those medical expenses every year. Now, naiwan ba yan sa bulsa nila? Hindi, because ginastos din yan sa ibang mga pangangailangan. Diba? Pero kung dati-rate ay kinailangan yan para bilhin ng gamot, para ibayad sa doktor, para ibayad sa dextrose, ngayon magagamit nila sa iba pa nilang pangangailangan dahil sinagot na ng gobyerno yung 75 billion pesos na gastusin sa paggaling ng kanilang mga kamag-anakan. No? So yan ang mga naihatid ng Daang Matuwid, Pangulong Pinoy, nitong nakaraang 5 taon hanggang sa katapusan ng kanyang termino. At yan din naman ang pinipresenta namin ni Lenny na itutuloy namin. Ang ganitong uri na pamamahala na kung saan kayo ang boss. No? I mean, these are not just words or parang sinisigaw na walang saysay. Kayo ang boss. Ano ba? Para sa English, kasi nag-i-Englishan tayo kanina, kayo ang boss, government for, of, and by the people. Diba? Ang ibig sabihin ng kayo ang boss, mangingibabaw ang interest nyo higit sa lahat. Diba? Kayo ang gumawa nito. Ibig sabihin, consensus, united, na nagtungo tayo sa isang direksyon. Kung walang korap, walang mahirap. Malinis, tapat, hayag, no, na pamamahala. At nakita naman ninyo na ang inyong pera ay bumabalik sa inyo sa pamamagitan ng mga serbisyo at ng tulong mula sa gobyerno, pati ng infrastruktura. So ito yung uri ng pamamahala na hinahatid ng Daang Matuwid at inaasahan natin na ipapagpatuloy ng ating mga kababayan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much,
very much.
For speaking. Bea Cupin, who covers you on a daily basis, our managing editor.
By the way, Maria, all three of you have computers. Ako, kape lang na sa harap ko, ha? Walang papel, ha? Just for the record. Just for the record, ha? At saka transparent ito. Glass, walang kodigo, ha? Walang kodigo.
We'd expect nothing less. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Continue the conversation online. Maro has his online at MAROXAS. Rappler.com is there. Lots more questions. I'm sure they'll be answered online. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's good. That was quite